Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored that you're a part of our Reading with Your Kids family. Thank you so very, very much. If you have a moment, please be sure to subscribe to us. You can find us almost everywhere. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Himalaya, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you can find podcasts. Our guest today is Joanna Rose. She's here to talk to us about Cheerful the Angry Chicken. You know, I can't wait to find out why Cheerful is so angry. And I also can't wait to meet you at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair coming up November 23rd and 24th, Navy Pier in Chicago. This is going to be an amazing event. Life-size toys and games. And you get to play with them. It's not like a museum. You get to touch them and play with them. You get to meet inventors. I don't know if you can get to touch them and play with them, but you get to talk to them. That's amazing. You get to speak to authors, and you get a chance to come and find out what it's like to be a guest on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. That's right. We will be recording families giving us little interviews, little reviews about some of the books that we have on display at our booth at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair. And check it out. You can experience all this fun at a $3 savings by using the promo code RWYK at shytag.com. That's right. Go to shytag.com. Use that promo code RWYK. Save $3 on every ticket that you purchase, and there's no limit as to how many tickets you can purchase. It's the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, November 23rd and 24th, Navy Pier in Chicago. One of the fantastic books you and your family will be able to check out at our booth at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair is One Drop of Kindness by our friend Jeff Kubiak. Kindness. For some, it comes so easy, but for others, it can be a struggle. The answer often lies in a person's personal story. And one drop of kindness, we're going to meet Gus, a one-time orphan who goes through life thinking that hurtful words and actions are the only way to behave and communicate with others. Interestingly, Gus lives in a town that holds a mysterious secret, which finally gets unlocked by something that was hidden away. By unlocking the secret, you too can join the ripple effect of kindness that Gus, along with his school and his town, is experiencing with the rest of the world. This is an amazing book that you will absolutely want to have on your shelf in your family library. And it's a great book that you can discover at our booth at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair. Check it out. Jeff Kubiak's One Drop of Kindness. And while you're checking out One Drop of Kindness, we also want to encourage you to check out Fairies of Frost by our friend Haley Nystrom. That will also be one of our wonderful books that we will be displaying at our booth at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair. The Fairies of Frost. It's a beautiful book, and it's going to give you a chance to meet Lady Solstice and the Fairies of Frost as they bring in winter and celebrate everything that makes it special, from all of the holidays, the family get-togethers, music, and more. It was chosen as a Forward Reviews Book of the Day and Editor's Pick. Now, if you can't be with us at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair to check out Fairies of Frost in person, of course, you can go on Amazon. It's available on Amazon. Just type in The Fairies of Frost by Haley Nystrom. Joining us right now from the Charleston area in South Carolina. We have a lot in common. We've traveled some of the same roads. I'm really excited today. She's written a beautiful book called Cheerful the Angry Chicken. Please welcome to the show, Joanna Rose. Joanna, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Jen?
I am great. You know, one of the great things about the show that people don't know is that, you know, we usually have a chance to chat with the guests before we start recording. And Joanna and I have had such a lovely conversation so far. It's too bad you guys weren't listening. It was really fun.
It was. Yeah.
So tell me, why is Cheerful so angry?
That's a great question. And this is a question I had when I was writing the book, you know, and I went back and read the book, and I thought, where does this anger come from? And to answer that, I have to give a little bit of the backstory. And part of that backstory is that when I was little, people used to say a lot of times to me, you're always so happy, and, why are you always so happy? And I used to think to myself, that's because you've never seen me mad. Because deep down, I had a temper, and I could get really angry. And it was something that I didn't understand, and I didn't know how to, use this anger. I just knew it was there, and in my family we were allowed to get mad. No one ever told me that anger was a bad emotion. So for years this is just how I was, and if I was mad, I was mad, and if I was happy, I was happy. But I always knew there was a better response in terms of happy than there was to being angry. So the way this story came about was very interesting, or is very interesting. And that is that I started receiving a message about maybe 10 years before I wrote the book that I was going to write a book. And I heard this message, and I can't even explain how. I just was getting this message, you're going to write a book, but it didn't mean anything to me. So maybe 5 years went by, and the message came up again, and people were saying, you should write a book. And I'm like, I'm not a writer. I've never written anything, and I was working in public service. 5 more years go by, and I'm at an event, and this woman looks at me and she goes, you have a book in you. And I thought, what is this with the book? What is this book thing that I keep hearing? So by this time in 2016, I'm a meditator. So the morning after this woman said this to me, I woke up at 4 a.m, and I said, it's a great time to meditate. The world is quiet. I'm going to ask the question, what is this message I'm receiving about a book? So I start meditating, and I put that question out there, and all of a sudden I could hear these 2 words come into my headspace, and they were angry chicken. And you have to realize how crazy this sounds. It's 4 a.m. I'm sitting there in the dark. I'm putting this question out there because I'm just putting it out there, and all I can hear is angry chicken. So I'm trying to quiet these 2 words because I thought they were interfering with me getting my real message. I wanted my real message. But as I tried to push these 2 words away, they got louder. And so I had to start listening to them because they just weren't going to go away. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to lean over. I always keep a pen and pad near my bed in case, I have a dream that I want to write down. And I lean over, and I didn't even turn on the light. Because I didn't want to break the flow. I knew there was a flow coming through, and I thought, I'm just going to do this in the dark, and I'm just going to write down these 2 words, angry chicken. And when I did that, my pen just kept going and going, and I kept writing and writing. And honestly, I wrote until my pen stopped. And all I remember thinking is, well, that's done. I hope I can go back to sleep now. And that was my initial reaction. So that morning when I got up, I remembered that I wrote something down, and I looked for my paper, and I read what I wrote, and something inside me told me, this is your story. You're the little angry chicken. Like, I just got it. I almost had goosebumps when I read what I wrote because I understood that I was in there somewhere. And at that moment, I knew there was something prophetic about the experience. And so I thought, let me just type this up. And from there, it began to take on a life of its own. Because after I typed it up, I don't even know what I Googled. It might have been self-publishers. And again, that's all I remember Googling. And I was just going with the flow, and I was really just thinking, well, let me research a little bit. And all of a sudden, 2 days later, I get a call from a publisher. And I'm thinking, how do these people even know I exist? I don't recall contacting a publisher. I just remember Googling self-publishing companies. Mm-hmm. And so I start this conversation with this publishing company, and I told him a little bit about my story, and he said, we would love to publish it. Now I'm thinking, okay, this is really all within 48 hours. I don't even really know what's going on. But I'm going with the flow of it. And Cheerful begins to come to life. And it took me 2 years to actually put it out there into the world. And I think I was probably a little bit afraid because, what do? We tell ourselves, I'm not a writer. We tell ourselves, I'm not an illustrator. I ended up illustrating the book because I couldn't seem to find an illustrator who could get into my head and see my vision of what I pictured her looking like. Mm-hmm. I kept trying to hire someone and find an illustrator, and I kept looking at these drawings going, that's not my chicken. And it became sort of a byline for my friends. They would go, that's not her chicken. It was like I knew I had a chicken in me, and that's not my chicken. So I start sketching just to show the publisher, this is my idea of what Cheerful looks like. And I sketched her out, and I thought, she has sass, she has spunk, she has vim and vigor, she has personality. And so I'm drawing, and I send it in, and they go, we like her. And I said, no, I'm just showing you an example, so you can help me find an illustrator. Mm-hmm. And they said, no, we like her. Keep going. And I stopped, and I thought, but I'm not an illustrator. How can I illustrate a book? So it took me 2 years to get over my own fear and this idea that A, I'm not a writer, and B, I'm not an illustrator, until I could finally just release those thoughts and send her off into the world. And after I did, she has just taken on a life of her own, continuously surprising me on where the book has gone, on where I've gone with the book, on the opportunities that have arisen, on talking to kids about emotional health, and it just keeps growing and growing. It's almost like becoming a movement. That's what it feels like.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Just the idea that you were meditating and Angry Chicken just came to you.
Yeah, and it did. It felt crazy, and I was pushing those words away because I thought they were blocking the real, what I would call the real message. Mm-hmm. Like I couldn't understand that is the message. It just had to get so loud it was practically beating me over the head in my head space. Write this down.
Yeah.
Write this. And as soon as I did, I'm telling you, that is the single most, beautiful experience I've ever had, about the power of meditation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm a firm believer in meditation now. You will never get me to not believe in the power of meditation.
Well, I'm really happy that you're giving into the power of meditation. I'm also really happy that you had the power to get over that self-doubt. And I think that's something that all of us suffer from time to time. Was there one or two particular things that kind of gave you that power to jump over those hurdles?
It came from the prophetic way in which the story flowed through me. I never take credit for the story, even though it is really based on my story. I don't take credit for it because I know that it was given to me as a gift. Mm-hmm. The way the story came to me, the way I wrote the story in the middle of the night, in the dark, with my pen just flowing and flowing and flowing, that something prophetic at that moment happened to me. And I was already working with children because I love children. I've been doing reading partners since I came to Charleston. I'm a big sister with big brothers and big sisters. So I was already very much into empowering youth at risk. This has always been one of my passions. Mm-hmm. So I remember thinking when I was reading to the children and reading partners, I just wish, I had a book that related more to these kids' lives, because one of the things I noticed in reading partners, it wasn't just that they had difficulty reading. It was that these kids, a lot of them from the inner city, had so much else going on in their life that was challenging. Mm-hmm. How could I get them to focus on a story about turtles laying eggs, in the sand, mm-hmm. for example? And I thought I would look for stories. I would seek out stories in the bins because Reading Partners has all of these bins and you get to pick your own stories. So I remember one day I found one about Babe Ruth, where Babe Ruth was in a boys' home. He grew up in a boys' home, and his first baseball was a stick. And the ball was just a ball of string. And he learned how to play baseball with this stick and this ball of string. And another story about a little kid who learned, I think it was Pele, the Brazilian soccer player, who learned mm-hmm. to play soccer with another handmade ball where they just either wrapped tape together or they did something and made a ball. That's how poor they were. Right. And I loved these stories because I thought, now these are the stories these kids need to hear. These are the stories I want to read to these children who have to overcome sometimes insurmountable emotional health issues and personal life issues every day before they come to school. I remember I had one where her uncle was shot in his home by an intruder, and then another week she came in and her cousin was run over by a hit and run driver. And you could just see the child was angry. Mm-hmm. And I just understood how difficult it must be to focus on reading. So there was that part of me that wanted to write a story that I would want to read that would deal with something like, okay, I'm angry, now what do I do?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're speaking about at-risk youth, and that's how I started my professional life a million years ago, was working with at-risk youth in the juvenile justice system here in Massachusetts. And I worked in detention centers and then worked with the families or helping the kids re-socialize after they had spent some time in detention facilities. And one of the things that struck me was that, and you reminded me of it in talking about the kids that you're working with, is it's a huge challenge for these at-risk kids because there are so many of them that don't understand the emotions that they're feeling. And so sadness is uncomfortable, so that becomes anger, and uncertainty is uncomfortable, and so that becomes anger, and then of course you're also things are making you angry, and that's a challenge for anybody. But when you're in a situation where everybody around you, all the adults around you, are also in that same kind of space where they're not able to understand the emotions they're dealing with, and they're not able to deal with them. It's incredibly challenging for those kids to move forward.
Absolutely. And the more I worked with the kids and reading partners, the more I found myself spending as much time on trying to build their self-esteem and build their belief in themselves and just give them hope that, your future is what you make it. Your future is whatever you decide you want it to be. Whether you read this whole book or not. If you love sports, then you can be a sports manager. If you love music, then you could do something with music. And just getting them to dream, because I think a lot of times these kids come from environments where it may not feel safe to dream. Mm-hmm. They may have parents who struggled and they lost their own dreams.
Well, that one of the things that occurred to me, and I have the same outlook, and I think I've mentioned it here on the podcast. My amazing niece, when I first met her, she told me at age 13 that she was going to grow up and she was going to be a doctor, an engineer, and a detective. Not one of those. She's going to be all three of those. Now she's cut out the doctor. It's a little bit too hard for her. She's almost 16. But my reaction to that was, yeah, you can do that. But I know that there are people listening, maybe not listening to the show, but there are people out there who will sit back and say, yeah, that's easy for you to say. But and the reality is, in our community, you can't make your own life. You can't make your dreams come true.
Right. And I remember, and I came from a supportive family, but I wouldn't call my mother a dreamer. Mm-hmm. I think she was a realist. So there were times I recall as a little kid, I would say something which to her might have sounded outrageous. I'm going to have this when I grow up and I'm going to travel the world, or I remember sometimes she would say to me, yeah, you think you're the banker's daughter. And it stuck with me. I always remembered it because it was almost like saying your dreams are bigger than your reality. Mm-hmm. Mm. And I remember the first time I went to Spain, I had no money. And I still, when I look back and think about that experience, I remember I worked a job from 11 to 7 in the morning, and then I got a second job from about noon to 5 at another restaurant. And in those two jobs, I saved maybe $4,000, and I went to Spain because I loved languages and I wanted to go to Spain. But when I look back now and I think about the things that people ask me, or that I would say to my own child, like, well, do you have health insurance? And do you have a plan? And what are you going to do? I had a plan. I enrolled in school. But I really, if I thought about it too much, I didn't have the money when I came up with the idea. I just had to make it happen out of thin air.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. And from there, I ended up deciding I was going to study in France. And I went to France, and I ended up getting a job with a family. And then I went out of the country. I got the proper paperwork and the visas. I went back. I ended up enrolling in the Sorbonne. And then I learned French. And because I learned these two languages, that's what opened the doors to the Foreign Service and a life of traveling the world. That's what opened those doors, was just me as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old saying, I want to travel. I want to go to Spain. And learning Spanish and learning French opened those doors. But I did it with just the dream, not the money. Not at the time. I created the money, but I created the money after the dream.
Mm-hmm. And that's so important for us to encourage our kids to dream.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Especially kids where no one else is able to do it. And I can see the frustration, and frustration becomes anger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you have a dream and somebody tells you you can't do that, or who do you think you are, or where do you think you're going to get the money for that? That can really create an inner sense of, I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worthy, right? These are source fractures that can go on for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. And I think it's so important for us as parents, as caregivers, as human beings to support others and to help them find ways to make those dreams come true.
Absolutely. And also, like with Cheerful the Angry Chicken, if someone is telling you something and inside you just feel it's not right, mm-hmm. right? Like, I have a right to this dream. This is my dream. Then don't let anyone tell you your anger is misplaced. I mean, think about every major movement in the United States and in the world. Right now, you know, it's all Greta Thunberg and the climate march. Look how young she is. Mm-hmm. She started with one sign sitting outside of the Swedish parliament by herself. And someone republished that photo the other day. And it was powerful because a year later, she had millions of people marching around the world in the name of climate change, you know, and the March for Science, and then the Me Too movement, and then the March for Our Lives, and then Not on My Watch, and We Shall Overcome, and the Women's Rights Are Human Rights. These are all movements that started with one person feeling angry and this isn't right. And look at the good that came out of some of these movements. Look at the change that can be created and developed. And it's the same whether it's on the micro level, which is the one person just doing this for themselves, or the macro level, where we're out to really create overall change and universal change.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the best ways we can help support other kids' dreams, especially our kids' dreams, is help them understand their emotions and how to deal with them. So what do you think are the best ways for us to do that?
Well, right now I'm taking a course called Impact Entrepreneurship, and I'm hoping that what comes out of this course is a larger, more structured program that is an after-school program that brings together good books, workbooks, professional psychotherapists, professional emotional health coaches, and people who study personalities that can work one-on-one with kids, because we really can't put all of the emotional health of our kids on the back of just parents. I mean, it really does. I hate to use the cliched expression, but it takes a village. But it does. Mm-hmm. It takes more than just parents, especially parents in inner cities. A lot of times they're working two jobs, or the opposite. They're unemployed. And because they're unemployed, their own mental health is suffering. They might fall into depression. Mm-hmm. They might just not have it because of how bad they're feeling about their own sense of self-worth and identity at the time. So we need to create programs, and my idea is it would function as an after-school program where we bring together all of these different people, and it would replace things like detention. where instead of sending a kid off to a room where he's punished for an hour because he's acting out, we look into why is he acting out, and we try to help him understand, and we what's going on in his life and how can we support you and what do you need from us, and we do it with multiple experts, not just one. And I see this model actually already working in certain environments, where in schools where they've replaced detention with meditation, they've had wonderful results. And in some of them, they've had 0 suspensions after implementing a program where detention was replaced with mindfulness and meditation. And it's grown to where they not only sit and meditate, but they make these meditative spaces very beautiful. It's not just an empty room. They'll have pillows and colors and rugs, and the program has really expanded into mentoring kids and tutoring kids and teaching them about the environment. And now they're cleaning up local parks, they're building gardens, they're visiting nearby farms. And it's this whole holistic approach to what does it mean when a child acts out, and how can we address this, not just from there's something wrong with you, right? Because that's not what's going to bring this kid up, is making the child think there's something wrong with them.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're talking about, it takes a village, and it is a cliche, but I'm looking back at my kids' life, and, in so many ways, my kids were really privileged. We weren't rich, but we were rich in family, and, my wife and I were together, and we've, my mom was a big part of our lives, and my wife's family is a big part. But even still, there were other people in our village that made a tremendous impact on my kids' lives, whether it was a dance coach or karate teacher or a football coach or a particular teacher at school. So I think it's so very, very important to include all those people, and for all of us to understand that we have something to share with kids. They don't, and not just our kids. There are ways that we can impact kids' lives, and sometimes all it has to be is a smile and a word of encouragement.
Absolutely. And I think we're making a mistake when we look at emotional health and we look at mental illness as two separate things, where we see emotionally healthy on one end of the spectrum and mentally ill on the other, as if there's nothing in between. Mm-hmm. Because the way I look at emotional health is it's a spectrum. Mm-hmm. There's days where, I would come home from work and something would happen and I wouldn't think twice about it. And then there might be another day where I'd come home from work, and if that was a really bad day at work, I responded completely differently. Right. And I might even say, Joanna, what's wrong with you today? Why did you respond I have a daughter, why did you respond to her that way? Mm-hmm. What she just asked didn't deserve that response, and I would go back and apologize. Right. But there were times, my parents have their ups and downs. Parents have times they're going through divorce. Parents have times where their own mental health is struggling, I can't say that means that their child is going to have mental health issues, but it's a spectrum, and on any given day, that marker can move. And we have to look at emotional health as just managing your emotions on a daily basis, and not waiting to the point where, your child needs to go for serious help or for counseling, which sometimes it gets to that point. Mm-hmm. But there are usually a lot of little signs before it gets that bad. Right. Unless you're dealing with major incidences in America, like a school shooting, for example. Right. Mm-hmm. As soon as you have a major incident where something overwhelms an entire community, like Sandy Hook. I mean, I grew up not very far from Sandy Hook, mm-hmm. and I can tell you the ripple effect of that school shooting, it went for miles. It certainly went across the entire state. Yes. The entire state. And I people in my town were impacted because they're friends of people in the next town over. And I remember just thinking, what can be done for these children to strengthen their emotional health after seeing this horrific sight that they saw. Mm-hmm. And I know that the families used that anger and mobilized, the Sandy Hook Promise, I think it's called, is their movement. And those parents are out there ensuring that something is done so that this doesn't continue to happen.
Amen. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I think we could go on and on for days, but I want folks to be able to connect with you and not only learn more about Cheerful the Angry Chicken, but also learn more about you and about all the kind of things that you're doing. So where's the best place for folks to connect with you online?
Sure. I feel like I hardly talked about the book, but there's so much. So I'm just going to let them read the book online or buy the book themselves. But they can reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Cheerful Chick 20. So it's Cheerful, CHICK 20 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I also have cheerfultheangrychicken.com, which is the website of the publisher. I have cheerfultheangrychicken at gmail.com if anybody wanted me to speak at their school. I love speaking to kids. So if there's one thing that energizes me, it's speaking to kids about their own emotional health. In after-school programs, I've spoken here at the Pink House, which is a local nonprofit, helping youth, through their summers for kids and through their winters. It's probably a spiritual-based Pink House. And then I've spoken at after-school programs. I love doing this. So anyone who wants to reach out to me, anyone who's interested in Impact Charleston and Impact Entrepreneurship, where we're trying to develop an after-school program that addresses, the emotional health of not just at-risk youth, but anyone who needs it. Mm-hmm. Anyone who would like to strengthen their own emotional health skills. We'll teach tools, we'll teach skills, we'll use books, we'll use workbooks. This is something I want to continue to develop.
Well, we are all for that too, and we wish you luck in that. And we look forward to you coming back to talk to us about the program and about whatever other projects you're working on in the future.
I would love to, Jed. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the other authors and the good work they're doing and some of the books I mentioned in your previous podcast. I just love them and shout out to all of them, and hopefully we can all accomplish something together.
We've been speaking to the author of Cheerful the Angry Chicken, Joanna Rose. Joanna, thanks so much for being part of our show.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be the author of Easy Paper Projects. You've heard me talk about the fact that we have lots and lots of books that come here to the studio. My wife always gets a chance to look at them first, to decide which books she might want to use in her classroom. She saw Easy Paper Projects, and she snapped it up and brought it right to her classroom. We're going to get a chance to meet the author, Maggie Woodley, on the next edition of the podcast. If you are the author of a great children's book, we would love to have you on the show. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. All you need to do is go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, click on the contact button at the bottom of the page. Let us know about your great book. We will let you know the next easy steps. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so very, very wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our guests, the author of Cheerful the Angry Chicken, Joanna Rose. Also want to thank our sponsors. Yes, we want to thank our sponsors, Jeff Kubiak. Be sure to check out One Drop of Kindness. And also Haley Nystrom, the author of Fairies of Frost. Check out their books, please. I want to thank my producer, Fatima Khan, for all she does for the podcast. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. And, of course, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.